morning music a little bit, eh? I'm not sure anything significant changed. There was no major shift in the tide, so to speak. The morning after, here we are in the Writ Race. It's the daily version of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics Podcast. I'm Dave Trafford. Welcome in. It's just one of the many offerings. Story Studio Network. Check out the website, storystudionetwork.com. And we've got lots of stuff there for you to go through, including this program and the Daily Brief. You may be listening in either one of the feeds. All right. Keith Leslie's here. You saw and heard him last evening on CH Television. John Wright from Maru Public Opinion and Sabrina Nanji from the Queen's Park Observer. I know that you've been busy. I just heard you prior to us opening the mics, Sabrina, on the radio, talking about the aftermath of what was going on, and I think that it was a status quo performance. I think we start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of meh, but for us, politically tuned folks, I thought it was pretty fiery. There were some heated moments, but for the most part, it was, fairly civil. Everyone played nice. The format kind of lended itself to that, lots of time for people to finish their thought, get their sentences out. I don't know if there was any breakthrough moments. I think, maybe just I'll run quickly through all the leaders, Doug Ford, what I'm hearing the Conservatives, from Conservative is that they're pretty happy with how he performed. He did what the PC war room wanted him to do. He, for the most part, kept his cool, didn't take the bait, when Horvath and Del Duca, kind of needled him, especially on the pandemic, which we've seen him get, a bit miffed at before. I think Mike Schreiner was probably the only one that visibly got under his skin. I think, at one point Ford was even turning a bit red. And, the whole binders debacle, him bringing debate notes when the other leaders didn't, and the debate consortium that runs the show asked him not to. I think, I don't know if normal people really care about that so much. I don't know if it will, hurt him in the long run, but I guess he stuck to his notes and his binder. I think, Schreiner probably had the most to gain and did. Of course, he's got no chance of forming government, but he might pick up a few seats. He mentioned University Rosedale and Parry Sound Muskoka for one, as he's trying to hang on to his seat in Guelph. But, it might be easier to, be so hard hitting and unequivocal in some of your responses when you don't have the chance of forming government. I think, maybe some people were looking for breakthrough moments from Andrea Horwath with the NDP and Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca. I don't think that really happened. I know some Grits I've talked to were happy Del Duca didn't, get overtly defensive or angry. My mom said he looked a bit stuffy. My mom, who doesn't really follow politics, I think that's probably what the general public thinks as well. But Andrea Horwath, I think, was probably the biggest disappointment. I don't think she spoke very much. She got a lot of airtime, and she didn't quite, I don't know if she would have brought more people over to her camp or rallied people to actually go out to the polls. So I don't really think this is a huge, major turning point in the campaign, but certainly fodder for us media. And I think that's kind of what people end up paying attention to most anyway, is sort of, the analysis at the end of all this.
Okay, so I think that's the end of our show, because Sabrina has pretty much just said everything that needs to be said. Hands up. Anybody disagree with anybody disagree with her assessment?
I was all prepared to say, well, I agree completely with what Sabrina just said. Right. I mean, her assessment of the debate is bang on.
Bang on.
And let's face it. I had said Ford held his cool, so I'll say Ford stayed calm, and he also stayed on message, which for him was important. And that message was, we'll build things, they'll tax you. That's it. Simple. The rest, it's all in the binders, but so what? I'm with Sabrina on that one. I don't think most people give a darn he was using a binder, because most of them didn't see it. Apparently, when the camera wasn't on him, his nose was pretty deep into that binder from people in the room. But on camera, you only saw him glance at it a couple of times, including during his opening statement. Andrea Horwath, on the other hand, I thought she perhaps should have used notes in her opening statement. Her opening statement didn't seem smooth. She got a little better as the night went on, but she should have been better there. I also noted that the NDP leader spent certainly as much time attacking Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca as she did Ford. and went at him pretty darn hard. Del Duca, the thing I learned most is that he has 2 school-age daughters. And that he does indeed get very defensive about the win years. And he at one point, when he was asked about housing, he went right back to talking about the 413 because they had put him on you flip-flopped on that. So he ignored the housing question, went right back to the previous question, super defensive. Just move on from that. People, aren't going to the minutiae of whether you held one position earlier or another one. And of course, there was a Liberal candidate who apparently spilled the beans that, we'll build that 413 eventually, just not now. We got to put the money in schools first. So there was all that playing in the background. I thought Del Duca held his own pretty well, but of the 2 leaders that needed to introduce themselves to Ontarians, I think Green leader Mike Schreiner clearly did the best job of all 4 leaders on the stage. He was the smoothest, he was the tightest, he was the most on point. And when he looked at Ford directly after Ford boasted about, his healthcare record and, he was defensive about the pandemic, but he said, we're the best on staffing up the hospitals and doing all this sort of thing. And when Mike Schreiner looked at him and said, have you talked to a nurse lately? Mm-hmm. Have you listened to them complain about, the staffing? Anyway, he was so bang on with those points. And I thought all through the evening, Schreiner seemed to be the one that not only made the points, a couple of times you've noticed he also played the role of moderator. Hey, can we all just calm down, calm down? And we'll get into whether someone else should have played that role, but I thought he came off really strongly. Now, whether they can pick up, he cited the 2 other ridings where they have their highest hopes, and that's, with the former Environment Commissioner Sachs in downtown Toronto and the Parry Sound Muskoka, where the Liberals lost their candidate, but it's, a pretty safe Conservative riding, or certainly was when the Millers held it. So we'll see. He's hoping to get there, but I think the Greens could absolutely play a role in tight races elsewhere. Well, people who will look, because let's face it, and we saw this again last night, the Liberal, NDP, and to some extent the Green platforms, there's a lot of common ground. Yeah. Voters who have some specific issues could find a leader in any one of those 3 that could represent their views. So there's a lot of thinking there that Schreiner, people would not have seen him before. The Greens have never been in a province-wide debate before. This was something people are going to look at him, and I think they're going to come away impressed. Will they vote for him? I don't know. They're going to vote on local candidates mostly, but they could play a role in tight races, and that all benefits Doug Ford.
So, John, I think there were a couple of speed bag moments that, Schreiner had at the expense of Doug Ford, and the one that Keith cited. And it gets to the point for me where the format is the worst performer. It is the biggest obstacle in actually getting to a point where we can have a question and an answer to that question. Schreiner did that often, put the question pointedly to the Premier, to Doug Ford, and he got off, he just, spun it off and off he went, and he made the mistake of saying to Schreiner, well, you're not going to build anything, and then Schreiner just speed-bagged him again and said, no, we're going to build hospitals, and we're going to build highways, and we're going to build transit, and we're going to build. He just nailed it. I think that the format in and of itself is the biggest problem. And the problem behind that is the media consortium. They do not drive the agenda. If this is the most important event in a campaign, then to give it up to the parties to decide how this is going to be run is a waste of time.
There was a point last night where I was watching the debate, and I have to say that I was watching it because I was going to be doing media commentary afterwards, and you'll know where it was. It was one of the first times when Andrea Horwath and Stephen Del Duca were talking, and she was just talking right over top of him. And I thought, what hellhole sentence have I been given to watch this? I mean, after all these decades of politics, I am chained to the couch. I cannot go because everyone else at that time is either going home or they're standing outside a TVO and they're protesting. Like, what am I doing here? And this is just something, I mean, the unfortunate circumstance of these debates is that they're not debates. This should be called talking points. I mean, that's the new show, right? Talking points. And that's what they do. But if it weren't for Brian Mulroney with that one moment of, you had a choice, sir, against John Turner, none of this would really matter. So I come away from it and say that a third of the people going into this campaign, and we know this from the exit polls that are done constantly, a third of the people have made up their minds before they even got into the campaign. A third of the people had made up their minds in the first week or so of the campaign. And then another third, depending upon, kind of what they see, hear, or render from it, tune in about a week and a half before the end of the campaign, take a hard stare, and either lock in or walk away. I can't see any of this having any kind of an effect on any voter. I can't. Number two, we have to go back to what we talked about the other day. There's no sense for change in this. There's no desire for change. But by even that point, if you're at 60% who want change or 65%, you've already made up your mind. The debate's not really going to counter it. So what people are listening to are us this morning, are the radio shows, or the televisions, and when they reflect on it. But I have to say that coming out of this, it's the same old maxim. And yes, Sabrina, I do agree with you, so I don't have to get into much of the win-loss column. But Doug Ford was left standing at the end of the night. He was affable for those who thought he was, their guy. He's benign for those who are in the middle, and nobody else changes their mind. So he wins. He wins because he's the leader at 38 or 39% or even 35. Who comes next? Well, Mike Schreiner, as I said the other day, he's great. He's got nothing to lose, but he was incredibly articulate. He's the head of the wrong party. The Green Party has always been bolstered to be about green. And while you can connect everything you want to in common life to green, Kermit doesn't get elected. If you want to, be part of another party and talk about wages and all that stuff, then go and run for the NDP. And for, the other two players, Andrea Horwath, you're absolutely right, Keith. I mean, she's been at this for 4 times. It was a sophomore performance. It was awful. And then Del Duca, all he had to do was remain standing because he's planning for 226. So at the end of the day, airtime backed up by a format that just doesn't seem to work. And Dave, to your point, I was kind of laughing at one point where they'd made very strict rules about not being able to talk over each other. And then the two of them, the moderators were going, stop it, stop talking over each other, stop it. Thank God. So I pity anybody who watched that thing last night. I pity the people who took part in it. And more importantly, we still await in the next 18 days or how many days it is for people to make up their minds and go to the polls. I suspect it'll be a lighter turnout than we thought, but I don't think it's going to change anything in the short term in terms of the numbers overall.
Well, the moderators were no Sachi Curl. I mean, let's just put
Oh
it that
my
way.
gosh, I'd even welcome that back. It'd be a moment of controversy.
Well,
But
okay.
thank goodness, at least though we didn't have 6 journalists from each TV network coming in, and so each TV network could be represented asking questions and chewing up time and just wasting time. So having those 2 moderators was good. They should have used. The moderators should have had the ability to cut the microphones off, not the people in the studio.
Well, but they did at some points, Keith, and you could just hear
it
them,
still didn't. You could
over
hear
top
them.
of each other. But the one thing that I would say, and I'd be interested in your comments on this, everybody just plays it so safe. I mean, Mike Schreiner, we say, he was. In fact, we're giving more ice time to him than we are to anybody else, so it's not really helping the other guy. But at what stage does Steve Del Duca, instead of being Mr. Polite Guy, turn to the premier and say, "You're lying"? What a liar you are. You're lying. Like, at what point do you kind of take the gloves off and play instead of playing safe and call a spade a shovel in order to cut through? He had an opportunity last night to do that. And that, he was very tut, oh my God, looking at the camera kind of going, oh, can you believe this guy's saying something against me?
He's got his own facts.
So this sums it all up. I mean, it's kind of a world which is completely devoid of reality, and yet everybody thinks it's supposed to be reality. It's just
they're all trying to give a clip for the TV. As we said, no one's other than us that are actually forced to or we're really super interested. The people that aren't watching the whole thing, the leaders are looking to get clips that are on the news the next day, that are played over in the media. So that's why we're getting, as you said, it's a series of talking points as opposed to a debate. So you get those, you have failed this province. And it didn't really go anywhere because there was no sustained attack. There was no coming back. The most sustained attack seemed to be when Ford and Horvath went together against Del Duca and the Liberal record. And Horvath's clip, where were you when all these decisions were made? Were you out having a coffee? I mean, what was going on? She was really good. That was I thought, her strongest moment of the night, but it was against the wrong guy. This battle for second place, coming in second is not going to keep Andrea Horwath in her job. She needs to get the first place job or find another one. I mean, let's face it, being opposition leader again, if she holds onto that, I guess technically she could hold onto her seat.
No, she's gone.
But after 4 elections, that's it. So she's got to be premier. So Stephen Del Duca, on the other hand, coming in second, becoming the opposition leader for him, that's huge. That's a massive victory. As John says, he's not going to become premier this time. The Liberals are coming from so far behind with so little money. If he can get to opposition status, opposition leader, that'd be a huge victory. So second place, while people have described this as a battle for second place, really it's not for Horwath. It has to be first place or nothing.
Well, okay, but let's just dial that back a little bit, Sabrina, because I know that you noted in the Queen's Park Observer earlier, I guess a couple of days ago, there is real jeopardy in terms of Del Duca's ability to win his own riding. That Michael Tobolo, the Conservative minister for, I guess, mental health, he's doing pretty well in that riding right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the public polls are saying, certainly what, internal polls are saying as well. Take that with a grain of salt because that's what I'm hearing from the conservative camp. And I guess at the risk of scooping myself, maybe I'll just tease, I'm working on a story later this week. I actually had boots on the ground in Vaughan Woodbridge where Del Duca is trying to win back his seat. And I knocked on doors. I went to local shops. I had a nice ice cream and asked people, what do they think of Del Duca? Are they willing to give him a chance? What do they think of Michael Tobolo, the current PC rep? And it took, almost 2 hours for me to find somebody who actually supported the Liberals and Del Duca. And this person ended up saying, they weren't comfortable giving me their name, but allowed me to, speak to them on background. And they said that they were supporting the Liberals and Del Duca up until he promised mandatory vaccinations for students in schools, and that this person is a parent, and they really weren't happy about that. And so now, even the one supporter I managed to find, is kind of second guessing things now because of that. And so, I think it's really going to be a tough slog for him. I think, one thing that might change this is, at the debate last night, all the leaders were asked, if you have any regrets, what are they? And I thought, it was probably a good moment for Del Duca to acknowledge that, the past Liberal government, even himself, they didn't listen to voters properly. And I guess that's kind of the explanation for why they were just decimated in 2018. Del Duca himself losing his seat, and now he's trying to, win back people in Vaughan Woodbridge. And so, the message to his constituents would be, I made a mistake. I'm owning up to it. And now I'm going to do better to listen to you guys. I guess I would have to go back into the riding to see if that actually can move the needle. But even, walking around there, I saw a few signs for Tobolo, a lot of new signs for the new Blues. But the general vibe I got from a lot of people was that, they're choosing between the less of three evils, which unfortunately for Mike Schreiner, I think also speaks to the fact that he's probably got, a slim chance of winning government, of course, virtually no chance of that, but maybe he'll be able to grow his caucus a little bit. But yeah, it's not looking good for Del Duca right now.
Well, I mean, clearly some margin of error there, but when you do that kind of survey, but I think, you know what, though, for a guy who represented that riding for so long, John, there's some jeopardy there in terms of, we keep coming back to who is Stephen Del Duca. I made the point last night on Mark Tui's show. I said that's what they had to really do, not explain that he was the father of two young girls, was to actually kind of get out beyond what does it mean to lead this Liberal Party. Somehow, claim or, stake some ground around his own brand. And I don't think he did that very well last night. Sure, he knew his files and he had his talking points. But I betcha that when Sabrina goes back into the riding, she might find one other person who's afraid to say that they're supporting Del Duca.
Yeah, but Sabrina, you can't be, knocking on the doors of relatives all the time. Look, there was nothing inspiring about it all, and the reality though is, what do the Liberals have to accomplish in this next election campaign? They have to get official party status, and they have to build to 226. And if there's another leader that is elected because he can't have his own seat, then by the time that rolls around and we don't have a pandemic, and that, Ford will have been in office for 8 years, well, then there may be an alternative that's there. And I hate to sound so forward projecting. But that's kind of, the lane that he is in. And it may be that Stephen Del Duca doesn't win a seat. And if he doesn't, then he's kind of like John Tory, searching around for a seat. And, we'll see what happens at the end of the day. But there should be something more inspiring on the plate, especially in his own backyard. There's no question about it. The second thing, though, is, again, managing the expectations of people. Doug Ford has run a good campaign. It started last October. When they started vectoring in on where they were going to go. The only thing that they were deeply concerned about outside of the, complete collapse of the NDP was whether the pandemic would rear its head again during the course of this campaign. And guess what? Hasn't. I know lots of people who have COVID, but for them it's a mild kind of circumstance and the government isn't being blamed for anything. And, life is just going on. The thing that's also struck me is that when everybody's talking about the same issue, then it's not the issue. You know what I mean? Like, there's no cut through, there's no breakthrough. So everybody's about affordability. Everybody understands that. One thing that's missing from all of this is a sense of urgency. Everybody's talking about, how tough it's going to be, with gas prices and things like that. And I just don't get the sense from the opposition leaders, including Del Duca, that they are up on top of saying, when we get back into power, like, when I'm premier, I will have the House back in no time whatsoever. There's just sense of urgency around that at all.
Let me just go there first, because I think this kind of lends itself back to format and strategy in the debates. So it occurred to me as this thing was going on last night, they would ask the question, and the first question about affordability, and they threw it softball to Andrea Horwath, and she had her 45 seconds to answer the question. Well, she spent 20 seconds of it saying, how hard it's been. It's just been awful, and everyone understands how difficult it's been, and we've just gone through such a terrible time. Yeah, we can know that. We understand that. Answer the bloody question. So it got right to the point off the bat that there was no sense of urgency, John. And as it went on, I thought, if I were advising the Green Party, I would be making platform announcements every time I had my microphone was open. And this is what we're going to do about that. We've just unveiled this XYZ element of our platform, and it's going to go into effect the 1st of September 2022. Next one. And on education, we're doing this. As opposed to saying, go and look at our website or read our platform.
I signed a pledge.
Oh, geez. I'm just saying that would be strategically for a guy like, Schreiner for sure, an ability to cut through. Here, you are getting the platform live and in the moment. But the other part of the whole format, I think, which is wrong, it's not a debate. And we wasted Steve and Althea last night. They were trying to moderate, so to speak, all of the noise that was going on the stage. They're two really skilled journalists. Their skill is asking really good, tough questions. Nobody does it better than those two, right? I mean, present company, no disrespect to anybody here, but I'm just saying there's a team journalism on that stage, and we wasted them. They should be in a position where Steve and Althea just go at
Someone drilled down on one of the leaders, because the leaders, there was no concerted effort against Ford by the other three leaders, which is the only way they were going to come together and effectively hurt him. And they didn't do that. So if the journalists, again, as we do in what we used to call a scrum, where you had more than one question and one follow-up, you would actually keep drilling down on that sort of thing. Althea Raj and Steve Paikin are absolutely amongst the best at doing that, and they should have been free to do that. But I get the sense that pretty much, not just the topics, but the questions themselves were designed by a committee and come up with a zebra.
Exactly. And I said this to Tui last night, and Mark said, well, Doug Ford wouldn't agree to that. And I said, well, to hell with him. Then he doesn't show up. Yeah. If you don't want to be subject to the questions of the day, then bugger off. And if this is going to be an important part of the campaign, then the media has to have the balls to actually put a product on the air that makes a difference to people. It can't just be we who are down in the weeds paying attention to this and then deciphering what comes out at the end. I mean, it's a waste of airtime. It's a waste of money. And, we're having fun talking about it on the podcast in the morning after. But in terms of it serving the electorate, it is a failure.
Not just in terms of serving the electorate, in terms of serving the consortium and producing a product people would want to watch. if I've seen some American debates, and we've seen them as well with some really good moderators, I won't get into names, where they actually they drill down and they keep pushing. And of course, I know it's easier when you have 2 people on stage as opposed to 4 leaders, but still, it can be done. I thought the format, at least it gave some chance for some one-on-ones with leaders going at each other. But they weren't. They were just sticking to their talking points for the most part and talking over each other if they had to. So again, having the journalists with a format where they could take, okay, this section is going to be on affordability, and we're going to start with boom. And we're going to go in with some very specific questions. And this is where Mr. Del Duca should have stuck to his one talking point that actually works really, really well. Buck a ride province-wide. It addresses affordability. He's going to do it right away. I mean, I know it's kind of gimmicky, but he's got nothing else at this point that's catching on. That's, as John says, that's breaking through. Everybody made good points last night at certain times. Did anyone change any voters' minds? And I think we sort of more or less seem to agree that voters' minds were not changed last night. They may have looked in a little more. They may have considered Mike Schreiner when they'd never considered him before because they'd never seen him. They may look at Del Duca and be very judgmental because they know the Liberals, but they've never really seen him before. But were anyone's minds really changed? Liberals are going to still vote Liberal. The Greens are still going to vote Liberal, or slip of the tongue there. The Greens are still going to vote NDP. That's what Kathleen Wynne once said to me after her last election. She said, talking about the Green Party, she said, they run a great game, but at the end they'll say, you better vote Liberal if you really want to get in this time. Mm-hmm. And there was something to that. The Greens were self-defeating at times. They're past that stage now. They are their own party. They have their own really well broad platform, but still, I don't know if anyone changed a lot of minds last night.
Well, and Dave, I mean, for you to say that we're having fun this morning, talking about this, let me just conclude with this. I mean, it's so unfortunate in many ways that we see leaders who are aspiring leaders and who are working for parties that don't seem to have momentum or a place to go. We see people like Pierre Poilievre, who actually there is a party for him. It's not the Conservatives, it's called the Libertarians, and he should be over there and maybe not get as much airtime. But at the end of the day, the pivotal question for this debate is whether or not there's some momentum that comes off the back of whatever it is. So if it even doesn't change a mind who watched it, at least does it give some juice to the campaign? Does it give a sense of momentum? And I would hazard this morning that there's a couple of campaigns that actually feel good this morning. One would be Mike Schreiner, who will, go on to, who knows what he's going to do after this if he gets his one seat. That great. But I would think the only other one would be the Premier. I mean, his team was high-fiving it at the end of last night because there's no damage. It deflected. In fact, at one point, the Premier turns and says to Mike, hey, you and I we get along really well, don't we?
Yep.
Man,
yep.
Oh, man, come on. And you see the look on Schreiner's face. It's like, are you kidding me? Don't get that close to me. Say, come on over here. Let's have a beer. We like each other personally. A little noogie going on there. And the other two are just left in the wings. Look, I thought it was a bit of a total, well, no, it wasn't. It was a total victory for the campaign team for the Tories because they didn't lose any ground. They didn't have their guy filling out. I mean, if all you can say is, oh my God, he brought his binder, then you think there's overall, he's done pretty well.
Okay, but I think there is one campaign that did gain momentum last night for sure.
What was
Sabrina,
that?
It was the 901 campaign.
Oh, yeah.
No?
Yes, actually, yeah. I have been talking to more people who are very, I think they're even more upset now after watching Horvath's performance last night. The knives certainly are out. I think, Del Duca maybe less so. But a political analyst had told me, watch the debate again on mute. I don't know if maybe a lot of people did that in the first place. And it's kind of like, you kind of see it in a whole new light. And, of course the policies matter. What they're actually saying matters, but, people vote for all sorts of reasons. And sometimes it's like a visceral gut thing. And when you watch it on mute and some of their mannerisms and body language, I mean, Horvath was doing this weird thing where she smiled at the end of everything she said. And I don't know why she was doing that. Like she would be talking about, horrific deaths in long-term care throughout the pandemic. And then she would grin after. And I don't know why that was happening. I know Keith mentioned she kind of stammered at the beginning, and it's like, you've been at this, like, this is your fourth time, going for the Premier's seat as leader. Like, I think a lot of people are feeling really fed up. They're, getting a bit nervous. But obviously, I think, I don't know if Horvath's necessarily feeling that, but she certainly kind of brushes off the questions about, this insurgency that's growing in her party. But you can see that she's, positioning herself in these early days, since the beginning of the campaign as the best positioned to, beat Doug Ford and the Conservatives. She keeps repeating that, they're at least 10 seats away. I don't know, if that's actually the case. That was 4 years ago. And her campaign strategy now is not necessarily to, campaign hard in the ridings that they currently hold, or where they're dominating. It's to, target PC and Liberal seats. And of course, they do have a big cash arsenal compared to previous years. So they do have more resources to maybe do that. But I know a lot of people are worried because, a lot of these races were very close. I mean, just in Brampton Center where Sarah Singh won, now the co-deputy leader, she just won by 89 votes. That's a very close race. And of course, we know the 905 is a very seat-rich area that, could probably make or break Horvath and a lot of these political parties. So yeah, the big night for the 901 Club. And unfortunately, I think a big night for spoiled ballots too. I think a lot of people are probably coming away feeling rather apathetic after last night.
All right, well, we'll let you get out and do your walkabout in Vaughan and Woodbridge. We'll call that a day here on the Rit Race. Sabrina Nanji, Keith Leslie, John Wright. I'm Dave Trafford. This is the daily edition of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics Podcast. Yes, and just a programming note. Wednesday evening, I'm going to moderate we're calling it a town hall discussion focused on the issues in the 6 Scarborough ridings. If you missed the show yesterday, drop in on it because I was talking to Dave Hardy, and he is one of the organizers for this event. And the whole idea of their group is the renewal of Scarborough. And they're getting there. But it's kind of sort of I won't say a one-sided discussion, but there's missing components in the discussion because, as we've noted earlier, the Tories will not show up at any of these events. But there will be a spirited conversation about the needs of Scarborough. They've been ignored for a long time. Anyway, we'll get into that tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. It's the Rit Race from Story Studio Network. Talk to you later.